Well, hello and welcome to today's Alpha Anywhere Q&A webcast and demo. Although today, not so much of a demo, I guess a small one, but we will be mostly going through questions. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Product Management here at Alpha Software, and I'm pleased to be joined by Dion McCormick, no relation, who is our Lead Solutions Engineer, as well as Sarah Mitchell, who is in charge of documentation. And today we'll be here to answer your questions. So now would be a great time to type those questions into the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel. So let's get started. Dion, I'm going to take you off mute. Hello, Dion. Are you there?
I am here.
Great. And I'm going to go ahead and make you the presenter.
Sounds good.
And there's your screen.
Dynamite. Well, hey, thank you everybody for joining us. We have another weekly Q&A webinar. We're going to actually focus mostly on Q&A today. So do us a favor, take the time, go to the questions section of our GoToWebinar control panel and put your question in there. Dave and the team will be reviewing them, and we'll be trying our best to answer as many as possible. And if we can't, we always will work hard to follow up and make it happen. By the way, you can always send these questions ahead of time to guides@alphasoftware.com. We monitor that closely, and we queue up questions, and it helps us kind of plan things. So we're very, very excited there. So a couple quick updates here. First, Alpha DevCon 2018. As we mentioned last week, we have a special session announced that will be part of this year's DevCon. And Dave, actually, I'm going to put you on the spot. If you can just explain a little bit more about what this session is, because I think it's huge and awesome and worth the trip in and of itself to our DevCon down in the Florida area. So
Sure.
If you don't mind. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So in this session, which is going to be led by Selwyn Rabins, our co-founder, he's going to take an application, which is both a web application and a mobile application, and it'll be based on some well-known website you've seen before, possibly the Amazon website, but actually I think they're going to go in a different direction. And they're going to show you how, first of all, that it can be built in alpha, by demonstrating the final result of us emulating all the screens and giving you the same look and feel and functionality of a top-rate commercial system. And then we're going to go into the code underneath and show you how it was all put together. So that is going to be, I think, a really neat session. It's going to be at least a couple hours. We're not exactly sure what day it fits into the schedule or how we're going to break it up, but it is a for sure thing that we're doing. And I think it's going to be very exciting. And then based on the application there, that's actually going to be used for the training, which will be available the day after the conference. It'll be a one-day training. Again, Selwyn will be there walking around, but it'll be led by Dion McCormick. Chris Martin will be there, Sarah Mitchell, and myself. So it's going to be a new format for training and a really cool new sort of special session in which we do a nice deconstruction of an app, of a well-known commercial application. So
Very
that's
cool.
what's up.
Yeah, and on that, which is cool, is they talk about how to use Alpha Launch to deploy it and also Alpha Cloud. So really, we're going to cover not only the apps itself, but also how you get it out into the hands of your users, which is kind of a critical thing. And the easier that is, the better it is. Great. So to find out more, you can go to our alphasoftware.com website. And then actually, if you just go to Resources Alpha DevCon 2018. This will allow you to go there. You can see the agenda, the venue. We have some new announcements and stuff. And one thing I also want to run through is that we've put up there the top 10 reasons to attend DevCon. I really enjoy reading this one. And I'm going to walk through them real quick here, but you can spend any time just going on, and they're up on there as once, is that, you really have this unique opportunity once a year to engage not only with other professionals, but also the Alpha development team and really get in front of them. And this is such a great opportunity to do that. Also, the things you learn will allow you to speed your development, learn new strategies and tactics, and overall improve your results of using Alpha. And one of the most important elements, which I always found very, very valuable, is the network and connect. You'll be able to find people who have similar kind of applications they're building, similar knowledge, and be able to share your information and work together on that. And I find that super valuable. And we see so many cool things that happen after DevCon in terms of people working together. Frank will be talking at the event, which is very, very important. No, Frank talks. You'll get all the key data and the details without a lot of hype and other things like that. You get the real deal that will allow you to get the information you need to go. And we also have one-on-one FaceTimes that allow you to sit down with experts and get your questions answered and move forward there. Obviously, we mentioned the training and really a very big impact for your money. And we love it because in the end, we always see the positive results of the people who attend in terms of the kind of things they do, the advancements they make with their applications and what they do with the knowledge. And it's always very fun to kind of follow up people, see what they do and see where they take the technology. It's very, very exciting stuff. So you can check that out. It's actually right here, and there's a little button right here to click that list, and you can also go ahead and register right here and join us at the DevCon. It's going to be really, really fun. Cool. So with that, what I wanted to talk about is we're not really going to do a demo today, but I want to give you a heads up that we're looking, and I'm sorry, look at all these slides. I've got to really organize it. This is kind of crazy. Just keep adding topics and topics. It kind of shows you the breadth of the stuff we've covered on here.
Wow.
Let's go
All
back.
the years. Yeah.
And for everybody else, you should be reading every slide that I go by, and you'll
Absolutely.
A quick review of the last 2 or 3 years. So it's pretty good stuff there. But I want to pop up here. Here we are. Okay. DevOps. We've talked about it a lot in the last 6 months, and we'll continue discussing that. And in fact, what we want to do is take our DevOps series and extend that. The first DevOps, we kind of focused on 3 key areas, and I'll jump back up here. One was process and environment, how to set up your process and environment. Next one is source control, which was very, very popular, how to use tools like Git and Subversion and stuff to manage the files in your project and work with multiple people on a project. And then we also talked about monitoring, and actually new things are coming down the road on monitoring too. We keep enhancing that as we move forward from there. But I want to go ahead and continue this series because we get a lot of questions on this. And so we're going to be continuing this series with a new section. It's going to be called testing. And the focal point of this is to have, and we're going to have a couple of sessions on it, is what are some of the best ways to test your application? What kind of tools can you use to test your application? And we're going to extend it. This is not just going to be for web or mobile. We're going to cover both parts about it because there's a lot of questions about it. Now, at our last developer conference, Chris did an amazing job kind of talking a little bit about that. So we're going to recapitulate some of that and redeliver some of that information. But I've got some new things I want to kind of explain on, well, when you deploy these things, how are you doing testing? How are you validating it? How are you making sure that it's rock solid before your users get it? And we'll be talking about that over the next couple weeks there. And at that point, we're getting close to our next big release cycle. We don't have a date yet, but it's coming up pretty soon. And in that will be a lot of API stuff that we've been talking about for the last 3 months or so, and we'll be diving into that. So be prepared. We're going to be going over testing and talking about that, which we're very excited about, and we get a lot of questions around that. And so we'll start that series in the next week or so, and it'll be a series of a few sessions, and we'll cover different parts of testing, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. I think hopefully will give you some new tools that you can take and help enhance the solidity, the performance, and really more than anything else, stability of your apps. Because the better testing you do, the less kind of fire drills you have in the past or after they've been deployed. So it's always really good to invest in testing up front. We're going to cover a couple different ways to approach that, how to structure your applications to make them more testable, and some techniques and tools that you're able to use. So with that, that's going to be coming up there, but no actual demo today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over back to Dave. And I know people have been furiously typing into the questions area the kind of questions we have or that people have for us, and we'll do our best to answer them.
Excellent. And we could use more questions, so go ahead and type them in. But here's we'll start with a hard one because I like hard ones. By the way, put in questions on testing if you want, because we'll probably not cover them today, but we can incorporate them into what we're going to talk about in the next couple of weeks. So Absolutely. If you're interested in that, please give us heads up. We want to deliver to you what you need. I'm sorry, right. Dave, I interrupted. And a bunch of the questions today will come from emails that were sent previously to guides@alphasoftware.com, so we will cover those as well. The first question, though, has to do, and maybe you don't know much about this yet, but AMP pages, accelerated I believe it's accelerated mobile pages,
Yep.
which is a Google initiative. And so the question is, can Alpha help generate these type of AMP pages?
You know, that's probably something I'd have to do a little investigate in. It's called
Yep.
the AMP project, and it's about creating much quicker loading and lighter pages on the mobile devices, since, as you know, more and more web traffic actually takes place on mobile than on desktop anymore. So I need to do a little research on that, to be honest, to kind of say, how do we support that and how do we integrate with that capability there?
So from an overarching point of view, though,
Yes,
the reason you would want to look, or we would like to look at AMP accelerated mobile pages, is because of the differences between mobile browsers and desktop web browsers. The mobile browser simply doesn't have as much memory or processing power behind it because the device is more limited. So sometimes you'll design things that look great on desktop, and even though you've made them designed for the small screen, they can be sluggish or not work correctly. And we've taken a lot of care in our UX controls to make sure that they work really, really well with mobile. That was sort of the whole point behind them. But anything we can do to make it more, to make it faster and follow better standards, we're interested in. So we will take that up with our development team and see where they are with that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Since Google's such the big dog out there, they really kind of drive a lot of different things, especially since Chrome is so used. So the two areas I see is obviously more and more I'm hearing more about AMP and guidelines to make them really snappy on mobile browsers, but also HTTPS. If you're going to notice that more and more they're really getting strict on HTTPS, meaning that they're starting to, like, there's a big unsecure message up here if you're not HTTPS. Also, they're really starting to downgrade site searches on non-HTTPS sites. So they're actually, within their algorithms, they're doing a lot of. So if you haven't locked down your site with HTTPS, meaning you are using a certificate, it's time to look at doing that. And it's not hard. Alpha fully supports it, both on the standalone and our IIS platforms, also our Alpha Cloud. So, and there's huge amount of great documentation about that. But definitely, you may not know, but you know, if you're depending on any kind of search traffic or anything like that, that's one of the key criteria nowadays, is that secure, because, you know, there's so much spoofing and phishing going on that this is one way for them to kind of help the overall community of people who use the web be more confident about the websites they visit and what they do with them.
That's right. You were talking before about how there might be a new release coming out soon, and there will be one coming out soon, but someone had asked a question about our releases in general. When a new release comes out, what do you typically do to apply it to your project? Do you, when you have a new official release? Also, they had some questions about what our typical product release intervals are. I could talk about product release intervals. I know that one pretty well, but maybe I'll let you handle the other portion.
Yeah. First is, you know, one thing that Alpha strives mightily is to make sure things are backwards compatible, meaning that that if your site's working, everything's working fine on a new release, it's not going to break something. But there are chances where, you know, we develop things so quickly and there's so many new capabilities and things like that. There are times when it will happen. So I'm always judicious about moving to a new release just on a standard basis there. What usually drives a new release to acquire is, one, my current release is sold, that it's, you know, not going to get supported very much, but more importantly is if there's new features and capabilities in the new release that are required. Now remember, super important that a release always incorporates two parts: the development system and the server. And a critical element is, first and foremost, to always make sure those are in sync, meaning that if you are using a certain version, and you can find that out, actually I'll go into Alpha here, go into help about, you'll always see a build number, a version and build. And this is actually this is a pre-release. So this isn't an official release because I'm testing new features and things like that. But super important is to make sure that your build number is the same here that on your server. Because if they're out of sync, especially if your development environment is ahead of your server environment, bad things can happen. So you always want to make sure that you're keeping those in sync. Now, what you can do, which is very easy, is that if you want to experiment with a new release, you can always install multiple releases on a machine. And when you do the installation of a alpha, you would obviously put it into a new folder. You do a full release into a new folder. But that, it's kind of problematic because once you start having a couple releases on your same machine, you got to be careful about what you open. In fact, we had someone send a question about how to kind of manage that then. So what I do is I cheat because I have situations where I'm actually supporting applications that have been out there for a while and they're not going to update their release. They're not adding new capabilities or things like that. So I'm technically using Parallels Desktop, which is, I'm on a Mac and I'm using Parallels Desktop. Let me go ahead and open this up here. Oh, it keeps jumping back for there. I'll have to, how do I do that? Let's see, go here. There we are. Okay. So I can spin up multiple virtual machines on my Macintosh, and in each one of these I can create an environment. So like this one right here, I'm running some older releases because it's customers and people I'm supporting that haven't upgraded to more new releases. This is more my newer one that I use for demos and everything else. So I'm constantly updating it and pulling in new pre-releases and things like that. So really the most effective way to kind of protect yourself is use a virtual machine system, and there's a lot of good ones. There's ones that run on Windows, and you can also spin up things like AWS. You can actually spin up desktops there and stuff like that. And the beauty of that is you often have a stack involved, meaning you not only have alpha, but a certain version of your database and other pieces there. So often I find it's just easier, instead of worrying about having multiple things on one machine, is use virtual machine technology to kind of set up a sandbox, a playground, and be able to download and update and do these things within that environment. Now, what's cool too, and I'll go ahead and go here to the cloud, the other challenge often is that you want to initially kind of check out a new release. So you want to bring down a new pre-release, kind of play with the new features and do some stuff and not screw up anything from the old. So a virtual machine is a really good way to go that. And then the next step you want to do is, okay, I'm ready to start, I want to use this new release. I'm going to apply it to one or more of my projects. So what do I want to do? So one of the challenges is you may already have like a QA environment and a production environment up on a server running a certain release of alpha, and you're like, well, I don't want to disrupt that because everything's kind of working. I don't have any problems there. So I guess you could spin up another server and do those other pieces here. And that's where the Alpha Cloud is really powerful, and what we recommend and where we're seeing a lot of our clients go. Is one of the cool things about Alpha Cloud is that it takes care of all that provisioning stuff for you. So you can actually create multiple deployments of your application. And when you do create those multiple deployments, each one of those can be using a different version of Alpha. So I'm going to go here and show you this. I have this thing called deployments. So I'm going to open that up and look it up on the cloud. And I'm going to go, and you'll see that you'll notice that it's saying, okay, this deployment for this website is using a certain pre-release. But if I want to, I could say add a schedule and redeploy that with any one of my pre-releases. And I can either redeploy this or create a new deployment where it will spin up a whole new website, kind of a playground for me, and then I can pick and choose those here. So the beauty of this is that every time we do a pre-release, those pre-releases and the full releases, the last one was on December 14th, these are all stored on Alpha Cloud. So you can literally say, you know what, I want to deploy it with this particular pre-release or this or this or this. And the nice thing is, since you can set up different websites, i.e. different deployments, then you don't have to worry about overwriting your production or your current environment. So if you're just doing pure experimentation, what you do is, set up a virtual machine with a new development environment, then spin up a server with the latest pre-release, and then you can do everything you want to. You can simulate the front end, the back end, everything else, and not touch your stuff. And then when you're ready, you can go ahead and just execute and deploy it, then redeploy. And that's the cool thing too, is you don't have to go to the server and stuff. If I want to just redeploy this and pull it onto the most current release, I can just say, you know what, I'm going to go to the most current pre-release, redeploy this. I don't have to republish anything. It's just going to basically rebuild the environment on Alpha Cloud with that pre-release running my existing code set, which is very powerful because the only thing that's changed is Alpha. I don't have to worry about a different update or a different publish or anything like that. So, Alpha Cloud is really nice from that standpoint, is that from the server side, it makes it easy to have multiple environments, multiple situations, and not get confused and screw them up and screw up your production pieces there. In terms of the actual development environment, again, you can install it on the same machine, but I highly recommend that you either have a test machine or use virtual machines to do that, because then you really protect yourself from the, I just opened up my project in a new version and published it accidentally, and that's not what I wanted to do. And that can cost you a lot of time and energy that, spending a couple $100 on a virtual machine or something like that would save you a lot of time and money. So there's a question of, there is cost associated with it, but I find that it's so easy to spin up virtual machines and get them set up the way I want. I just don't have those problems anymore in terms of, I screwed up an existing client's deployment, because I'm never going to accidentally screw up theirs because they're on a separate VM. And again, the price and price points of these keep coming down as far as the cost to actually have these pieces and run them. And you can spin them up, do them, delete them, re-spin up new ones. They don't have to be permanent or anything like that. So that's kind of a quick and dirty overview of how I kind of manage new releases. I'm very judicious about testing and validating before I apply it to any of my existing projects. I feel a high confidence level I can do that, but it's the old, Reagan, trust but verify, meaning, trust that it's going to be very good backwards compatibility, but it's always worthwhile, and we'll talk about that in the testing, where you might want to run some test suites on it to make sure that nothing strange has occurred, that things are a little differently, because alpha moves very quickly, and our goal is to bring you the most value, the most capabilities. So the team is working very hard. They spend a lot of time to double check to make sure it's backwards compatible, but nobody is perfect and infallible, and you want to make sure you're comfortable and confidence. And that's the part of it that's important, is confidence. Once you have brought down and deployed, you want to be confident that you're not going to get midnight calls and other things like that, that you've gone through the steps, the process, and that's what we talk a lot about developer operations. You've set up the process and the steps so you don't have those problems when that occurs.
Excellent. So we have questions rolling in here. Let me just find a good one. Okay, here's a good one, because I am asked this sort of question quite a lot, and it has to do with how do you move from the client side to the server side when you're dealing with variables. So the question here, let me just find
good question.
Question.
Yeah, absolutely.
How do I use session variables from JavaScript to update a grid field with a variable in a form layout? So
very cool. So if you're using grid, you could probably just reference the session variables directly, but you probably have a specific use case. So let me go ahead and open up a grid here, and I'll talk about it. Now, really important is that, and let me bring up if I've got a nice little image here. Let's see if I got any good image I can just throw up here. I should have like my pack of different stuff. I'll throw this one up here. Okay, so remember, whether it's a mobile device or a web browser, is that it is a self-contained little environment running here. And in that environment, it is running JavaScript to do the behaviors, HTML and CSS. Now on the server side, and so anything that it transpires here is through JavaScript. There's no server-side language actually executing on the mobile device or the browser, only JavaScript. So what Alpha is doing is it's sending down JavaScript and then things are happening on a local basis. But on the server side, you have then the XBasic and Node and other pieces like that. So you can use things such as session variables, which are when someone logs in and sets up a session on the server, and they don't have to log in, they just have a session on the server sets up sort of a scratch pad where it can store information. Those are called session variables. And what's very important is make sure you're starting to use the context object. That is critical, and there's a lot of documentation on our website. Before it would always be session dot, and now it's context.session.variables dot. So very critical, because then you're going to be safe whether you're on IIS or standalone or things like that. But there may be a situation where what I want to do is I want to use one of those session variables in some JavaScript running on the mobile device. Now, normally that doesn't work because session variables only exist over here on the server. But there's a cool feature. If I open up, and I know it's on UX, but let's go ahead and go here. I just want to make sure. Session. Yep. Okay. So I'm in the properties of my grid. So you notice I clicked on the properties over here. And for people who are new to Alpha, this is our grid builder. You'll see that, over on the left-hand side, you have where you set up your search area, detail view, etc. But there's a key area, and this includes both on the UX, which is our form, and grid. There's an area here called properties. And in properties, I have done the following. I clicked right here, up here in the corner, and I clicked search properties, and I typed in session. And there's a feature called published session variables. Okay, so here is published session variables. So I'll double click on this. And again, this uses the old nomenclature. So I know I just said make sure to use context, but sometimes you're going to see, you still see session in places and things like that. But you'll notice in here, you can put a list of session variables that you would like Alpha to publish to the mobile. So what it will do is when it sends the information back to the mobile, it will take those session variables and it will include those in here so that they're available for the JavaScript scripts that are running there. And so I would go in here and let's say I go session.user ID, session.region, session employee ID, whatever it happens to be. These are just session variables that are on the back end side. And so what you can do is by publishing right here, then what will happen there is it will take these session variables and publish them on the client side. And now in your scripts, you can use a special script here, which is in this case grid.object, get session variable company name. And so what happens is when Alpha, when the web page here calls Alpha, Alpha says, oh, okay, here, I'll get you ready. It includes those session variables you have specified in here, and those are now locally. Now any of the local JavaScripts will use the current value of those session variables that are on the mobile when they got published there to do it, and you can just put in this little script here. And it works the same way with a grid and also with a UX, meaning if I go ahead and open up a UX, okay, and I go here to properties, you'll see in here, publish session variables, same thing, I put session.user ID, whatever it happens to be, and now you'll notice in the UX, it's dialog.object.getSessionVariable. So that's how you set it up so that you can use server-side variables in your client-side code. And again, anytime you need that variable, you just call this little thing, give it the name of the session variable, and you're ready to go. So notice if I declare it session.company_name, I get session variable, just the name itself, company name. And very important, these things are case sensitive. Because we're dealing with JavaScript, everything in the world is case sensitive. So what you want to do is refer to everything in uppercase, both there and also there, and then you won't have any weird things like, well, God, I can't find my session variable, even though I published it from there. Now, one thing to consider too, it's very important, is that you have to define which session variables are published, meaning we don't publish all the session variables. We give you that control. And only the ones that are listed in here will be available in this particular, in this case, UX. So if I set up this customer grid here, and I set up 3 or 4 session variables, and then I go into my UX here, and I don't set up 3 or 4, or use only one, only the ones you specifically state right here will be available. So be careful. You might just copy and paste them from one to the other. You might assume, oh, they're all there, they're not there. You have to, on either the grid or UX, declare and specify which ones, because that tells the server which things to pick up and include when it sends it down to the client to be able to do that. Now, very important, when you are when you're building a mobile app, so let me go ahead and pick up a mobile app here. And in fact, I'll do it right here. So now there's a question of, okay, I'm building a mobile app, and this mobile app is going to be offline disconnected. So therefore, what I want to be able to do is when I'm running on the local machine, I want to be able to have some session variables and other things that are set up when, say, the person logs in. So the way I do that, and there's sort of 2 ways to do it. You can put it in local storage, or I kind of like to do this. I'll go in here, I'll add a panel card, and let me go ahead and do this here, and I'll add some fields. So I'm going to call this field user ID, region, and let's say employee ID. Okay. So I create these hidden fields, and this panel card is not shown. See, so the user's not going to see that, but they're in my app, and I have these hidden fields right here. Now if I go to the server-side events, and I go, in this case, to, oh wait, I want, here we go. Okay, so, and I apologize, for some people this is going to look like more code, and this, when you start doing mobile offline, you'll get used to this. It's standardized there. And let me take a step back, is when I created my new UX, I used a really cool template in here called Login Component Mobile App Persistent Login. And this is a really good one because what it does, it sets up when you log in, it actually calls back to the server, it does all the login, and then what it does, it creates what's called a JSON web token and puts it on the mobile device. And so if you're running like in PhoneGap on there, you don't have to re-log in every time. There's some really cool features here. But one of the key things it does is when I'm in here and I click the login button, what it does is it actually calls a function on the back end called XP login that does all the things I did. And what I can do in here is then I can go down here and I can set the value of those hidden fields in this script to be those session variables. And so what happens is when the person logs in, I actually set the value of these there. Now, the cool thing about that is that these are persisted on the mobile device. So once I've set them, they could close the mobile app, reopen it, and these will be set up. And then what I can do is when the person re-logs in, I can update those, or if they log out, I can clear them out. But now that I have those fields down there, I can refer to them in JavaScript. I can also do some cool stuff where I can actually refer to them in my show and hide. Let me go down here to my client side. I can use them in calculated field expressions, show and hide expressions. I can actually go in here and set up arguments. And what arguments are like global variables. So like if I want to filter a list, I can go in here to arguments and put in an argument right here and link that argument to that hidden field. And that allows you to use it. So that's my technique for doing like offline apps, is basically when the person logs in, I populate those pieces here and do it. Now, that said, if these change over time, let's say every once in a while I want to update and put some other data, I can write my own refresh where I basically call the server, grab that data, and then update these fields at any time. I don't have to use that XP login function. You can do it yourself. But that's the design pattern I have. What I am going to do is talk to Chris, who's our super expert on mobile, and see if he has other ideas. You can put things in what's called local storage, which is sort of a mobile apps version of, or any web apps version of kind of session variables where it's local and managed locally. But the reason I like putting them in these fields is because, for instance, let's say I'm going to go into my application here and I have a button in here and I only want to show that button if the region is US or whatever. Then what I can do is I can go to the client side show hide expressions and I can say insert field region equal to US or EU, whatever it happens to be. So you'll notice I don't have to write JavaScript. I can just basically refer to these fields in these client-side expressions like show hide expressions, or if I want to do an enable expression, same thing, I can insert that field. So once I've set these up, it turns out actually it becomes very easy for me to kind of show and hide things and everything else based on these hidden fields, and I don't have to do coding, which is one of my primary objectives, is to minimize the coding. There is a little coding that's going to take place when you do here, because in this XP login, you have to write a little bit of code. And again, I know, bear with us, it looks complicated, but it's standardized. We have a lot of documentation on it, videos. But there's a little bit of code you would write there, but once you've done it once, it's the same over and over again. That allows you to look up like in a database and set those fields. And then once those fields are available, you're good to go and able to use them anywhere you want. So real quick recap. First, if you need session variables, you need to publish those to your app. The way that's done is through what are called publish session variables. You define which ones you want. The system will take care of it. And then you can use those in your session variables.
Pause you right there because someone had a question about this very dialog box.
Yes.
Which was, I noticed that you put, for example, company name in all caps. Is it a requirement that it's in all caps?
Yes. It is.
It is. Okay.
Well, I think, okay. Yeah, no, you must refer to session variables in uppercase. So
Okay.
like if I want employee ID, you got to put it in uppercase. And by the way, it's a good practice just because JavaScript, if you get the case just wrong a little bit, it screws everything up. So highly recommend you do, that's one thing I never understood why JavaScript went with case sensitivity. I know it's a fundamental decision they made, but it causes so many little like debugging things because you'll like be doing something and you'll just have one little letter off and it will just stop functioning and just, but that's me.
Yep. Yep, absolutely. Great. Oh, sorry. So carry on with your, yep.
No, that's it. So, okay.
Another question about the, this dialog box. It says that there's a tip at the bottom, an alternative method other than using this. You can also reference session variables in any JavaScript code by using the getSessionVariables method. Can you just talk about that for a second?
Oh, okay. Right here below, right here?
Yes.
Okay. So basically, this is the JavaScript you would see. So let me walk you through it. So you'll notice that grid.object.
Sorry, just to be clear, though, this is the what they're showing you here is not an alternative to this box, is it? Or is it an alternative to this?
You have to.
You always have to use this box. Okay.
Yes. Yep. Okay. Because when it does this get session variable company name, it goes to either grid or UX and says, okay, look at my published session variables. And if they've been listed in here, then they match it. So if I say employee ID, if I do this call with employee ID, I will have had to make sure I go to this box and put that in there. Otherwise, this call will fail because it won't find the data. It will say, sorry, you didn't publish it, so I can't help you with anything there. Good question there. By the way, when we talk about session variables, if I want to set like a default for a field here, I can just go in here and say session.employeeID, and it doesn't have to be upcase in this, but this will require me to be offline when this occurs. So I'm sorry, online when we occur. So if you need session variables, you don't necessarily have to go there. The only time you need to do what we're talking about is that if you're going to refer to them in JavaScript functions or in offline kind of applications. So just want to be a little clear on that from that standpoint. So that's how you get to use session application or session variables in client-side scripts and stuff.
Excellent. We have a bunch of great questions today, by the way.
All right, good. No, we
love it. For a day that we didn't have a big demo, it would be sad if we didn't have good ones, but we've got great here. And actually, the next one I'm going to turn over to Sarah for a moment. Someone asked if we could do a little explanation as to this brand new friendly dates feature, which has been mentioned in the pre-release. So Sarah, if you're there, let me take you off mute. I kind
of like unfriendly dates, but that's just me.
Unfriendly dates.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of high school.
Warm them up. Sarah, are you there?
Hi there.
Excellent. I'm going to go ahead and make you the presenter, if that's okay. And if you could sort of just give us a quick overview about this friendly dates feature that was added, that would be great.
Yeah.
And also, can you make yourself a little louder, either by screaming or moving closer to the mic? Okay.
I don't know if I can get any closer to the mic than I am. It might be my connection, unfortunately.
Much better.
Yeah, much better. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oops. So friendly dates. The question is asked, what is this new friendly value display is what it's called in the release notes. It's an alternative way to display a date. In most cases, you think of a date, you see it as like, year, month, day, or day, month, year, or month, day, year in the US. Friendly dates let you display it in different formats such as today, or in 2 hours, or next Friday at noon. And so I've put together a little example here to show you this. This I have here on the left is my UX component. It's got a text box in it that has been set to a time type so that it holds date and time values, and I defaulted it to now. And I enabled the date time picker down in the date time picker properties, and you'll notice right below that there's this new display value using friendly text. So this is on the right here, the detached working preview, and it shows my component, that time, that date time value. It's it's got is it a day, month, year, and then hours, minutes, seconds, milliseconds, and then AM or PM. if you enable, like suppose I wanted to display this in a different format, like maybe I'm displaying meeting information in my app, I can turn on the friendly date time display settings, and I can change this to show a friendly type, such as using this calendar format, which there's two settings here, the display type, which is abbreviated, standard, or extended. This is just the amount of text shown, so abbreviated would be something like today at 1 o'clock. Extended would be something like last Friday, the 23rd of July, 2017. And then standard is somewhere in the middle. And the show time part dictates whether or not you see the hours. So always show it, never show it. Show the hours if it's today, if the date is the same as the current date. Show the hours if it's in the current month, or show the hours if it's in the current year. That's what these day, month, year settings mean. So if I just accept the standard here, I'll show you what this looks like now. So if I refresh my working preview with that turned on, it will show Thursday, the 2nd of April, 2020, which today is not 2020, and I'm a little confused why it's doing this to me, but in theory, it shows the correct date.
By the way, as part of our future testing, we're going to be able to validate if that's correct information automatically.
Well, it's shown correct in here, so if we go to today, I click OK, it says today, 1:40 p.m., you know.
Pre-release.
We'll
make sure that's
pre-release.
nice and smooth before we
I'm going to ask some
it.
questions.
Yeah.
It might be my system. My system might be a bit off.
So this reminds me a bit of like how my email displays when I'm looking through it.
Yes.
Sometimes it has a date, but if the date was just a few days ago, it might say Tuesday or yesterday or today.
Yep. So that's so that today relative time. If you decide to use relative instead, that's how you can get that type of format, and this will display
hours ago, days ago.
Relative to the scope. Scope is just how detailed do you want to display it? Do you want to display it down to the second, or would you like to keep it up to just maybe days? And then there's this precision value, which is like I want to see like just 1 would mean show me only 1 value, and 5 would show you know, in 3 weeks, 6 days, 22 hours, 59 minutes, and 14 seconds. So
But
expand how much excess information you get.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. So that's
set that up for our DevCon and put that on our site.
Yeah. Yeah. So the friendly date thing kind of goes hand in hand with another type of control that we have, which is the let's see if I can find it in here. It was a date range selector. And the date range selector allows you to do stuff like I want to see all like today, yesterday, this week, last week, next month, selecting a date range.
Great for reporting.
Yeah. So these kind of go hand in hand. So this allows people to select, you know, ranges of time based on a month or a day or a year. And then the date, the new friendly dates text allows you to display date information and time information in a context that is more meaningful than just like, you know, 2 o'clock. Because if you've got an appointment app and it says my appointment's at 2, but you don't see the current time when you're looking at it, you don't know that maybe 2 o'clock is in 10 minutes. So having that kind of alternative way to display the information is very useful for some people.
Fantastic. Thanks very much. I think that's it, unless we have other questions here on Date Picker, which I don't see right now. So thank you very much. Let me go back to Dion. So Dion, I'm going to make you the presenter. Thanks again, Sarah. Okay. Right.
I know that's jarring for most people.
Whoa, my goodness, you're back. You're back. Fantastic. All right, let me go through my questions.
Maybe I should put this one up. It's a little more peaceful and relaxing, like, you know. Welcome to our Q&A.
Here's a great question, and if we don't know the answer to it today, let's find out the answer to this. And the question is there a way to find a civic address, which I think is probably what we call in the U.S. a street address, using the device's latitude and longitude? So like, can you call back to some service and say, this latitude and longitude, this is probably 122 Main Street, you know?
Well, interesting enough is the answer is yes. And the way that would be done is through, Google's, geocoding capabilities here. But let me see here. First and foremost, what's kind of cool is if you're building like a web connected app, we actually have a new type of, and I don't know if people have seen, there's some great documentation on it, where is the location? Where is that?
Now,
for
logistic reasons,
Google address suggests. So this is a special type of text input that will do that auto search. Like when you start typing in, it will start filtering and actually call Google and do those things like that. But that I've noticed it's only really been useful from the standpoint of like when you're typing in data into a data form on the web. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, no, sorry. You're covering exactly what I thought you were going to go into. Yeah. That's great.
Cool. So that's like if you're building like a web base. Now, if you're on a mobile device, there is an action JavaScript, and it's going to require connectivity because, again, we are using that. Actually, it's not action. It's called geocode and address. So you can pick either Google or nominatim. You point to what field on your screen for the address, city, state, zip code, etc., and then what you would want for your latitude and longitude. Now, this is geocoding, so it's taking the address and putting in there. But what you want to do is you actually want to translate a latitude and longitude into address. And so in that situation, I think we're at a position where we need to call Google from an API standpoint to query a latitude and longitude and see if it returns an address, which I believe they have in their API model. Off the top of the heads, I can't really put that demo together here, but we could do a little research and find that out. But I can see where you want to is saying like, I'm at this local address, find there. Now, there is another alternative too. And actually, I've done a little work on this. So let me see if I have it located here. It's called Google Places, which is really cool. I mean, everybody knows about Foursquare, but Google Places. Let's see if is it in here. Do I have it on this one? That's a mapping. No. Okay. Guess what? I go to my other, notice I popped over to a different virtual machine. And on here, I've got my older versions, and I'm pretty sure I've got Google Places. I did that. We can send you a link to the information, but I've done an integration with Google Places, and it's very straightforward. And what Google Places is, just to let you know, I thought I had that on there. You know what? Let me go here. Bear with me real quick, everybody. I'll see if I can't do it in a moment here. Global mapping. Yep. And let's go look here. Getting a lot. I got to get organized. There it is. Okay. Let me go ahead and open that up. Okay. So I created a basically a component that would allow you, and let's see if I could do this and see if it actually shows it. Okay. Gotcha. Okay. So this is an example of, okay, and I know this is rough because I'm kind of doing it off there, but and let me go ahead and do it in live preview so it looks a little nicer. And this is working on an older version of Alpha. That's why the newer one's a little better behaved. So here's a latitude and longitude and a radius, and ignore that for now, and then a type of store, and then my key here. And if I click Add Places, what it does is actually runs I've created a little function called Google Places list places, and I'll go ahead and just run that. What it does is actually calls Google Places, and then what it does is it gets everything that's close to that in relative direction. So what you can do is Google Places has a full API that says, here's a latitude and longitude. So let's go ahead and see if I can get a location here. I don't know if I can do it on mine because I'm not in the web browser. But what it would do is it would grab your latitude and longitude and then make a call and saying within a certain distance, give me certain types of stores like restaurants or stuff like that. This was used to kind of like say, hey, I'm hungry for a taco. Where are the closest taco joints like there? And so I did that. Now, the alternative is what I think someone wants to do is say, find the closest physical address, which I think you can do within it. And I can go ahead and we can do a little bit more of a real
let's take a
walkthrough
look
of
at
this.
that, because I have a feeling there'd be a lot of other people would say,
Yeah, so I
cool if I
want to
could
go
make that
through this
work.
because
Yeah.
you know what's cool is that I used kind of the traditional, I took a curl command and turned it into it, and so dissected that, and so I can walk people through the code here. Most of this is auto-generated by Alpha. So as you can see, I basically have the URL, I pass it the Latin lon, my radius, what I want, and then what it does, it makes that call, and then I get from that call a JSON that I can then parse and use to do my stuff there. So to do this honest, I think there would be a lot of interest in it. And what's going to be great is that this, I just used a curl command to Alpha, so I can show you how I did that. But in the future, we're going to actually have even easier ways in the next releases that are going to be focused on APIs going to make this simpler. But we can walk through that. I think that's worthwhile on a future one versus me trying to just kind of, because this has been a little while since I put this together. And we can actually look and see if there's a way to say nearby search, don't get types, but get like the closest physical address. So we can maybe do that from the Google Places. Now, a couple little things is you're going to need a Google API to do this. And also you're going to need you'll have certain limitations on number of API calls per month before you have to pay Google. So keep that in mind if you build it around Google, that at a certain point, you're going to have to pay them if you're getting like, you know, I think it's over 25,000 API calls a month or something.
It's quite a few calls, yeah. But
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
if you had a public-facing website that had lots, thousands of users, you could run into that.
Yeah, but like, you know, I'm sure Uber is doing 25,000 calls per second nowadays, you know, and those kind of things. So it gets expensive. And Google's not cheap. I haven't looked at the pricing lately, but the base plan after you hit that was like 10 grand a month.
10 grand,
like
yeah,
that.
something, yeah,
But
I know. It was,
hey, it's hard to be a
They weren't
$1 trillion
kidding.
organization. People have to pay for that, right, for you to make that much money. So anyway, but you got to consider how much money they put into building and obtaining and maintaining that data. So yeah, let's plan on doing it. Maybe we can even do that next. I want to do the test stuff, but if there's enough interest, everybody can raise their hands and say, would you rather see test or would you rather see the detail on places, how to do that? And we can kind of freshen that up and get it ready for everybody to see.
Quick question. Someone asked if Alpha interfaces with Microsoft Business Intelligence software, and if we had maybe any exampbles of that.
And I'm assuming it's Power BI is what they're talking about.
That's what I'm going to assume, yeah.
Yeah, so Power BI, and we have multiple Alpha clients that use Power BI with Alpha. Now, I see most people it's loosely connected because the reality is Power BI can call directly to your database. So if you're just doing data and collecting data, you can put that right into a database and then Power BI can read it right out of it and do those kind of things there. That said, Power BI also has a full web API call capability. So you can actually insert data through web APIs into sort of Power BI's environment, or vice versa. Power BI can call out to a web service and collect data. And that's kind of where we'll go in the future, is instead of allowing people to talk directly to the database, we're going to see people more and more will be calling a web API to say, give me a list of today's data, and then use Power BI to do the visualization there. So the answer is absolutely. Most people I've seen really do what's called a loosely coupled, meaning they basically just go right against the database, and then the Power BI pulls its data out, puts together dashboards based upon your database information. Alpha is responsible for maintaining the information in that data because Power BI is not really going to write data. It's only going to read data there. But there are ways to use web APIs to interact with it. And that extends beyond Power BI. There's companies like Domo and ClickData and other things like that that are available that are very powerful, that allow you to do visualization of data and show that without having to write a lot of code. It's good for business analysts, so they don't have to actually write screens or anything like that. So the answer is absolutely. It really depends on what you want to do with Power BI, but I think most of the time you could get away with loosely coupled, especially if you're comfortable about who's seeing that data and their ability to interact with it with the system there.
Terrific. Just a quick question back onto session variables. In the example that you showed, you were also using an X login function, and someone had a question about whether or not you can use session variables even if the user is not logged into the Alpha security framework.
And the answer is yes. When Alpha Oops, sorry, I ran around here. Dun, dun. Go back, find my little server here. Where's a good server picture here? I've got them around here everywhere.
While you're doing that, the
So
the people are really looking forward to this Places demo. So now that you've said it,
I
think you're on the
Pandora's
hook.
box
We've
has
got
been in there.
like a dozen people who've come back and said, "Yeah, I want to see that." Okay.
It's so funny. It's just like I saw the movie Gladiator, and it's like, oh, everybody in the crowd put their thumbs down. So I guess thumbs down for testing and thumbs up for Places, and unleash the lions on Dion.
Yeah, exactly.
By the way, we have made a policy decision that you're not allowed to release the lions on the presenter, even though you would like to at times. I know, we understand that, but no thumbs up for like releasing the lions on Dion. That we're not going to allow that. Okay, so I'm showing a mobile device, but this is also could be a web device, could be a desktop web browser. When you hit a URL on Alpha, the moment that URL comes up, it creates a session. And what a session is its understanding of who it's talking to. So if I had 5 or 6 web browsers, each one of those talking to the server, each one of those web browsers is going to have a session set up the first time it's done. And then we have something called session timeout that after a while, because someone may walk away from their desk and 5 hours later, your site is still on their screen, but we don't want to clog up our server. So you don't have to securely log in. Now that's called an anonymous session, meaning that Alpha doesn't know who you are, but it just takes some information and sets up and places information on your mobile or your web browser. So the next time it calls back, we know, oh, it's that web browser that's asking for this data. So that allows me to then set up session variables that, you know, it knows, oh, I set up a session variable for you where I just recorded a piece of data. Now the power comes into it when you start using our security system, because what you can do is when they first hit your site, it's still going to set up a session variable and you can start collecting data, whatever you need to. But what you can do is when they log in, you can then set up a whole bunch of session variables about that person, sort of their user profile, and then those can be used later on. So the classic example is I log in, I know what organization I'm with, and then I can start filtering grids and other things down the road and insert records in the database with that session variable. So for instance, let's say I had a multi-tenant setup. So the person who logs in is from company A. The second person is from company B. When I log in, I set a session variable saying I'm company A, a foreign key, like, you know, I'm organization number 1, which is company A. And then whenever I insert a record in the database, I use that session variable information so that when a record gets inserted in the database, it's inserted with my company, and for the other person, vice versa. So that's if you're doing something like multi-tenancy. But it may be every time I insert a record in the database, I want to include your employee ID. So when you log in, I look up your employee ID, I set that session variable, and then what happens is when I insert a record, I insert that. So I always know which employee inserted what records or updated what records in the database. But again, you don't have to log in. The session's going to be automatically set up. You can start using session variables immediately. Like, let's say you went to a page and you said, okay, fill out your first name and last name. So that's the first page you go to. It's like just a standard form. And then when you go to the next page, you can say, okay, take the first name and last name, store them in session variables. And then on the next page, you can say, okay, put a little piece on the text on the screen that says first name, comma, last name, or last name, comma, first name, by combining those 2 session variables. In that case, I don't have to have any of the security enabled, but it's still going to work because it knows, oh, I'm on this browser, this is the person, that's how it goes from there. So I hope that gives you a little more flavor on session variables.
Terrific. Well, we are just about out of time, so I'm going to do one short question. And the question asks about source control enhancements that we hope to see this year in Alpha Anywhere. What, if anything, is Alpha doing about source control? You've done certainly webinars in the past about how to use GitHub and stuff, but do we have anything on our product roadmap in terms of specific features for source control? And so I can answer that yes, and I can tell you very briefly about the 2 that we're looking into. One is a direct integration with GitHub into Alpha Anywhere. So it'll be right there on the web project's control panel. You'll be able to move files in and out is our plan. And the second thing we're planning to do is to allow multiple people to basically edit the same UX at the same time or the same other components at the same time by calling something we call a master component, where you've sort of segmented it into different areas of functionality. because as people work more and more in teams, right now having two people edit the same UX at the same time is a complete recipe for disaster. You can't really see what the person has changed, even when you look at it in source control. You know, sure, it's in English, but it's not really spelled out. It's like programmer English as to what the changes are between the two variants. So we're looking at a way to make that smoother. So that's that. If people have other suggestions or problems or frustrations they're having with source control or really with anything in Alpha Anywhere, please go ahead and send an email to guides, G-U-I-D-E-S, @alphasoftware.com, and we will get back to you on that. So there are a few other questions we couldn't get to. I have written them down, and I will be sharing them with Dion, and we will handle them next time. So I want to thank everyone here who showed up, all those who asked questions. Dion and Sarah, thank you very much for presenting, and we hope to see you next week in our next Q&A webcast. Thank you again, and goodbye.